And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We've got a special one today because the internet is just full of really good takes on this specific topic. And I think there are a lot of ways that you can go about it. So we are going to, as always, dive into the idea that I'm about to say from both sides. And that idea is, should the U.S. men's national team's best players come home? Should any U.S. men's national team player be in MLS? This is obviously stirred up from the idea that Weston McKennie is rumored to be heavily pursued by FC Cincinnati and other MLS clubs, but FC Cincinnati leading the race with a $15 million bid ready to go. We're going to look at what it means for MLS. We're going to look at a complete 180-degree switch on what it means for the USMNT, completely separate of each other. And then we're going to finish up by comparing the two and trying to really answer the question is, can you want MLS to get better at the same time as wanting the U.S. men's national team to be at a high level? Because I think that's a really interesting talking point, and I know my co-host Connor has a ton of thoughts on it. Connor, how you doing?
Yeah. This is going to be a great episode. We're going to take all the Middlesbrough haters and make them American, and that's what we're going to have for this episode.
Yeah, that clip is now on 600 plus views, 27 comments, all of them negative.
Yeah.
But somehow we have two likes. We have two out of 5 likes. So
yeah, that's me and my burner account.
yeah, I love it.
Um,
Oh man.
we've gone international at this point with our hatred. Before it was just like Minnesota and why can't I remember the other one? Philly or something? I can't remember.
No, New England didn't like us for a little bit.
Oh, New England. Yeah. But now we've expanded. We're going worldwide now.
That's how you know you've made it. When you got international haters, you've made it. Which means that you're going to have to get an international hater scarf from Middlesbrough so that you can show it off every once in a while. Aiden
I don't
Moore's
think I'm going to
balls
be
out.
allowed to step in Middlesbrough. I'm pretty sure they'll like take me out the minute I go there.
Man, we gotta do a not only the DP Pod like MLS tour, but we got to go international with it too and take it overseas.
Only
That'd
to
be,
places that we've pissed off.
yeah, like I said, we got hopefully the Italy guy coming up. Maybe we can
Oh yeah, we would
get
definitely have to
some.
go to Italy then after that.
Yeah, definitely get some over there too. But anyways, when we go, we'll pick up some scarves to expand our collections. But clearly, we have what we have to work with. So what are you rocking today?
I think it's kind of obvious. We're
Yeah,
obviously both going for the same team, and I only have one scarf for them. So I've got the FC Cincinnati scarf. We were talking about Weston and Cincinnati's pursuit of Weston. So there was really only one scarf to go with here.
yeah. I had a couple to pick from. I have a couple FCCs from my away days there. I have a Juventus that I could have done for Weston. I've got a couple of USMNTs, but this was the one that I could find first in my mess. I'll have to send you a picture of what my closet looks like. It's a nightmare. I have no organization. I have no idea where these things are. I need to figure out a better way to store them. But I stumbled across good old Wiener Dog 513 FC Cincinnati. And why am I happy I picked this one? Because these are some hot dogs on there, and hot diggity dog, is this an
Oh,
audacious
God.
type of move?
Thanks for listening, everybody. That's the end of the episode right there.
I was gonna try and do what's the, I don't know who sings it, but the HOTDOGS on TikTok, the one that we keep sending Matt because he eats hot dogs like they're bottles of water.
You eat bottles of water.
Matt does.
That doesn't surprise me.
He's a
I
he's
have no idea what song you're thinking of.
well, I'll have to send it to you. I can't believe you don't have any connections to like general like friends. This is why I'm the social media guy and you are just here.
That's just not what my TikTok feed is. It's not hot dogs,
I
believe it or
can't
not.
imagine what your TikTok feed is, honestly. I
It's
don't
a
even
great
want it.
TikTok feed.
It's
It's
probably
got
all like finance bros, top 4 accounting memes, and like the
there
occasional
are
like
some of those things mixed in there. I'll be honest.
that doesn't shock me the slightest. All right. Well, instead of going down a rambling hole, what Connor's TikTok feed looks like, why don't we start with the actual episode? And I kind of want to start in the country. I want to talk about MLS and what it means for the league itself to have players like this come back, to try and bring players like this come back, good, bad, and different? I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I think it's obvious. Clearly, FC Cincinnati and the league are out to destroy not only the USL, but also now the USMNT. And that has to be their sole goal, because why else would they be making bids to absolutely destroy players' careers and bring them over here so that the USMNT can fail? Like, that's got to be the only reason they're doing this. Like they can't possibly be trying to improve the value of their team, improve the quality, bring some more excitement to the league and to the team. They can't possibly be doing that. I can't wrap my head around a realm where that's the situation where they're trying to bring him in. I don't know what you think, but it just seems ludicrous to me.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about all that towards the end when we're comparing the two. Um, but listen, like we've been asking MLS to make these big in their prime signings to really push us into MLS 4.0, right? We've talked about it a little bit where we're like, oh, we're kind of creeping into that where we're getting more players in their prime wanting to come here. We got the money to spend, but we haven't really taken that big jump. This is the sort of signing I think takes us to that level, right? He's one of the best players on the national team. He's been very good for teams in Italy and England, no matter what the silly online people say about him in general. He is a constant workhorse. He does a lot of the really good, in the trenches side of stuff. He's a competitor and he's a fighter and he does really, really well. Um, I'm, I think if he were to go to FCC, they make him instantly one of the best teams in the league. And linking him up with Lucia Costa is going to be
Oh my God.
terrifying, right? Terrifyingly fun. I mean, Lucia Costa on his own is carrying this team. Now you've got Obina Nobuota behind him, and you can throw a Weston McKennie in there and, flex him too, because you've got a couple players, because you just brought in Pavel Bukcha as well, who is kind of filling that role. So maybe Lucci's going to go float out wide and then come inside. There's so many different things you can then do with this. It's very, very interesting to see.
It's That's the only thing confusing to me is like I don't know how they fit Weston into the team. Like I would think they'd have to do a formation change, which maybe they would do.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely see them when everybody's well, I guess it probably would be a while before they maybe do this now, but originally I was thinking, oh, they could go four at the back with Robinson and Miazga as a two center back formation. Obviously, those two would be really, really good partnership. Probably one of the best in the league. But now, obviously, Miazga is out for a while. And I figured the change from three center backs to two would free up a spot in the midfield where McKennie could come in. But with Miazga out for so long, I don't know if they would go to that necessarily. I feel like they'd more likely stick with the three at the back, go with some combination of like Haglin, Robinson, whatever combination they want to go with back
Ian
there.
Murphy is the last one you're looking for, and
Okay,
I'll
I'm glad I
stop
didn't
you.
say anything because Ian Frey was on my mind.
Ian Frey from Miami, nice.
Yeah, I
Um,
got the Ians mixed up.
I do have to let you know that Nick Haglund just broke his leg last night, so I don't think you'll be seeing
Um,
much of him. But to your point, right?
Tim
That
Keller time. That's what that means.
oh,
Don't
hooked
talk
into my
about him though, please.
veins.
No,
Um,
stop. You're gonna ruin his career again.
again, you can't do it twice. Um, no, so I think to your point, right? Like there might be a formation just based off of necessity. There might be a formation change to fix this sort of issue, right? You're looking at, you'd have to bring Orlano back into the left back spot properly, not a wing back where he's been very, very good. It'd be a negative in that sense, but you're getting an extra body in the midfield to control it. You've got now two players up top with Kelsey and who played up there last night? It was a young
Is it Kubo?
Kubo can play up
No,
there too. Yeah,
that might have
Kubo
been
can play up
Spain
there
years
too.
ago.
You could put Lucci up there and have him drop off in a false night. There's tons of things you can do. Um, but outside of FCC in general, I think that, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. I think this is going to be a signal for yet another push in the right direction for the clubs in this league to be more ambitious with their spending, right? If you think about every era, right, we're in MLS 4.0, 3.0, 2.0, right? It all started with one team being more ambitious than the rest, right? The designated player started with LA Galaxy and Beckham and was followed by Red Bull and Henri, Fire and Blanco. And now you're at a spot where these players are the norm. These are the players that you're trying to bring in, unless you're Montreal, I guess. And then you had MLS 3.0, where you've got Atlanta United who's saying, we don't want to do the whole designated player retirement thing. We're going to go find South Americans and push into that market and see if we can convince them to come here. And boom, now it's everybody's hottest scouting area, regardless of if they're having success or not. That's where everybody starts looking. Now maybe we're looking at a St. Louis who are saying, okay, I'm going to move away from that and go into younger, more established players from Europe again. Not the older ones, but the younger ones. Maybe we see a shift towards them, right? None of that happens if we don't have teams who are saying, I'm not just going to follow the mold. I'm going to do something like this, right? And we saw it with Toronto back in a little bit, but this is, I think, levels to it. And again, and there's another one where you're like, oh, maybe you want to just be an academy setup, right? And we want to build from the academy. All teams are now trying to take another step forward with their academy and develop instead of buy, right? Aiden Morris just played his last game in Columbus, one of the best homegrown products probably ever. You could probably make that argument for it. But none of that happens if, and I don't know who the first, official academy setup was, but none of this happens if you don't have one person who's like, I'm going to try and change the mold and make something different. So even if McKinney doesn't get over the line, I think it's a sign that's saying people are now ready to be, it's kind of like follow the leader, right? Like, I won't do it until this person does it. And I won't do it until this person does it. And then you're looking for whoever the first follower is. Somebody's going to break that mold. And then the first person's going to go and follow them. And then the next person's going to follow them. And now we've all taken the step forward, right? Minus one or two teams that are always going to be held back until big changes are made.
I think people are forgetting the fact that West hasn't signed anything. He's not going to FCC. Like, there's nothing that says that he's going to FCC right now. He just took a meeting with them, and people are losing their minds over it as if he signed the dotted line while, like, it's like they act like he left in the middle of a Copa America game to go to FCC and sign on the dotted line that he's going to play in MLS for the rest of his career. It's absolutely insane, the level of leaping that people are taking right now. But the thing that's very frustrating to me is people love to complain all the time about how bad MLS is. It's not even like they're like, oh, they're so far from a top 10 league. The quality is garbage. So then MLS goes out and tries to bring in top quality players. And then everybody is up in arms like, oh, how dare you? Sorry, you're not allowed to bring in those players. You have to go find hidden gems around the world. You're not allowed to bring in talented players who are from the US. It's just ridiculous. Not to mention that MLS played a hand in making Weston or helping boost Weston McKinney's career. He started out here. Like, why is it so ridiculous that, oh, Weston wants to come closer to home where his friends and family are and play there? Because in the designated player spot, you can make good money in the US now. This isn't 20 years ago where you made like nickels and dimes compared to the rest of the world. Like, you make good money and you could be much closer to home. I think it's not out of the realm of like ridiculousness that people would want to do that. Plus, like, the league quality is so much better. I mean, the fact that the greatest player of all time decided he wanted to come play in this league, I feel like is a testament to the fact that the league is improving and it's got quality now. I'm still not saying it's a top 10 league in the world. I think there's still progress to be done before you could say that. But it certainly has been improving like at a very, very fast pace over the recent years. And I feel like they've been doing a lot of things right. I know they've been doing plenty of things wrong lately, and we've talked about that a number of times. But in the general movement and progression of the league, I think they've been doing a lot of good things. And this is another thing to add on top of that they've been doing well, is this level of ambition.
You really, really just want to get to the end section of this. Everything you said I had planned to put at the bottom of this episode, and you're just like, I can't hold it in anymore. Boom.
Sorry, we could rehash it at the end.
You're like the podcast Karen. You just can't help yourself. You just gotta yell at whoever you need to yell at. But it's good because I agree with a lot of your points, and we'll cover that later. Kind of just to bring us back on topic here. I think these are the signings that these clubs need to start making to take us to that next level. And people forget that this isn't an impossible thing to do, right? Designated players don't have a salary limit. If you have the right pitch and timing on their contracts, any of these guys can make their move. And I understand that some clubs want to go for older guys that are going to sell shirts, jerseys, merch, whatever. Some are really going to try and get the unknown players to sell on for profit later. That's cool too. But I think if we do really want to cement ourselves as a top 10 league, like you were just mentioning, or as Don Garber puts it, a destination site for top players, it needs to start with these types of signings. International caliber players in their prime, still contributing at a high level, that need to come to the league, right? That's how you take the step into top 10. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of people online who have disdain over something like this, and the argument of top 10 versus top 50. And you get the people who come out and say it's not even better than the Italian third division, and obviously they don't know what they're talking about. But the people who are sitting there saying it's not a top 10 league have good points, right? Top 10 leagues all are places that other people want to go to in their prime, not as a oh, I'll think about going there later type of thing. So how do we get there is you start bringing those people in, you raise the level of the team and the league and the teams in the league, and it gets more and more appealing, I think is the word I want to use there. And from that, and this will be my last point before we move on, building off of that, right, where you're building up these teams and leagues, and the ceiling is getting higher and more competitive. I think it then improves the league top to bottom in terms of the academy system, right? Right now, we're seeing a lot of players signed to these homegrown contracts, and they're either tossed onto a first team bench or they're sitting in MLS Next Pro. Maybe they're going out to USL Championship loans, and it feels like the development is good for some, great for others, terrible for some, because the quality in those lower leagues are very, very different. So, thinking long term, right? If you start signing players like McKinney and players of that caliber to your first team, well, now your first or second sub off the bench isn't going to be, academy kid number 3 who you're bringing up because, there is no more depth. It's going to be your TAM player that is, contributing at a decently high level, that is then going to push the homegrown guy back closer to his level where he can compete. And you do more of that, and now that bottom pool is getting a bit stronger as well, just by association, right? And if MLS Next Pro becomes more talented and more competitive, it's good for player development. And again, we're about to get into the USMNT side of this. If you want the U.S. men's national team to be full of players that play in the United States, or because they have to, you need a strong development program. And if the development program isn't as strong as it could be, you're not going to have a strong national team. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, I don't think that this is like the end all be all greatest part of this move, right? I think this is, small chips in a bag. But I think it also is something to consider for long term. I think that it has a bigger impact than just FCC in 2025.
Yeah, I think that the one thing I wanted to say before we went on to the USMNT side of this is the notion that MLS is going out there to try to kill the USMNT, and this move is just a way to, constantly MLS is like ruining things for the USMNT is just so ridiculous. Because if you look at the Copa America squad that's there, majority of this team has had some time spent in MLS or MLS adjacent clubs. So like Sean Johnson, Matt Turner, Mark McKenzie, Shaq Moore, Tim Ream, Chris Richards, Miles Robinson, Joe Scally, Tyler Adams, Weston McKinney, Gio Reyna, Brendan Aronson, Ricardo Pepe, Tim Weah, and Haji Wright all have spent time at some point with an MLS club. Doesn't mean that they were necessarily in the first team. Some of them spent only time with a youth team. But if you just got rid of MLS, right? Like if we just took it out of the picture, you are not looking at the same USMNT team. You're looking at a worse team, 100%. A number of these guys are not going to hit their level without them getting some support from MLS, whether it's them discovering them, helping to train them. And I'm not saying that them jumping over to Europe hasn't helped their career. It definitely has, way more than they could if they just stayed in MLS. But the notion that MLS is hurting the USMNT and we should just get rid of MLS's impact on helping create USMNT players is just so ridiculous and just dumb. It's just flat out dumb. And you're just looking at your Jackson Yules, your Sebastian Leggettes, and you're saying this is the level of quality that MLS can make. and just completely glossing over the fact that they've had a hand in helping almost a majority of the USMNT like roster in helping shape their career.
A fair point, a point that probably fit in the last section better than here. Again,
I only want to talk about the third bullet point. Like
I know, I could tell. I prepped you for this, and you're like, nope, I'm only talking about one thing. But you're right. To tie it back in, you're right. And when we talk about development and pathways, if we aren't keeping that at a high level, then our development drops, our development stagnates, and then you're relying on dual nationals, you're relying on kids who are the highest of a not so good group making some big jump over and then hopefully sticking in a country they're not familiar with at 17 years old, right? It's a bigger gamble. So having MLS to be more successful helps in the long term with the national team, which we'll talk about later. So let's move.
Yeah, we should move on because otherwise I'm just gonna keep talking about the third
You're
bullet.
just gonna keep. We're gonna get there eventually. You sit there and you put your hands down and you're gonna say, "Wait for your turn. We'll get there."
Okay, I'll be patient.
All right. So let's then move to the national team and flip mindset. Right. Not anything about MLS. I'm trying to clear your mind here. No MLS impact. No crossover. Just the men's national team. What does this mean for the national team? Are we instantly going to be worse? Are we going to gradually get worse? Are we going to get better? What would and let's not say just a McKinney move. Let's say it becomes a general trend of maybe not the top of the top, but the certain players maybe on the bubble coming home.
I would say I think people will 100% overblow how much of an impact it will have on the players and the team if it did become a trend. I would say the most important thing is for them to be in Europe to develop while they're developing when they're in that key range of like 20 to 25. I think could be really crucial for them to learn and kind of like learn in the European system. I think if they came over somewhere between like 26 and 30, I really don't think it's the end of the world. Like I understand that like it would be better, obviously, if they were in Europe getting game time with a tougher competition. I think it would still be better for their development. I just think at that point, there's only so much more that you're going to probably develop before you kind of hit your peak. And like, this is the best that I'm going to be able to be. And so I think if they came to MLS in that time, I really don't think it's going to completely shatter the USMNT. Like, it's not going to turn the team into like a disaster. We're not going to like fall into like the fourth best team in the region. Like the team will still be fine. They will still be very talented. You could almost make the argument that it'd be good that they're playing in the same league. You can build chemistry from the club level as well, learn how to play with one another. So I think like I don't think it's like the best move. I don't think it's how you're going to maximize your potential with the USMNT, but I also don't think it's the end of the world. The team's going to be ruined if people start coming over to MLS. Because even if some of the bigger guys do, like if Pooley comes over at some point and West comes over and I don't know, Chris Richards comes back, there's still going to be tons of people in Europe. So if the European way is that much better, then there's going to be new guys stepping up to take over those roles if the level of play drops that much from them coming over to MLS. So I think it will be fine. No matter what, it will be fine. The USMNT is not going to fall off a cliff if guys start coming over to MLS. The bigger problem is at the head coach spot. That's the bigger problem, not where the players are necessarily playing.
Yeah, it's fair. I think there are valid criticisms, and it's a mindset thing for fans because I think short term it hurts us. I think short term, and not immediate short term, but the next 2 to 5 years, I think it hurts us. However, if it continues to be a trend and the league begins to grow and strengthen as we expect it would, we turn it around and it becomes like I don't want to say Spain or England where all of them play at home, right? But maybe like a Belgium where you've got a decent mix, I think. I haven't really checked the Belgium last time, but one of those sorts of setups where your domestic league is at least producing a level of quality that can compete, right? Now, short term, because you're still going to be transitioning from what we have right now, which I don't disagree with anybody, is a low level comparative to where they could be. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. That little transition period would probably hurt us. However, if we back that with proper spending and the changes that are required to do that, I think long term it's a decent idea. Now the problem is I don't trust anybody in the decision making pool of MLS to do that properly. So is it as, and you mentioned this, is it as bad as, the second anybody steps foot in MLS, just kick them out completely? No. But I do kind of understand where they're coming from a little bit, but I think it's not online, which shocking, I know, is not discussed deep enough, right? In 2018, we had guys like Bradley and Josie playing at home, some of our best, and we missed the World Cup, right? They were in Toronto. We missed the World Cup. Oh my God, it's because all of our players went back to MLS, right? Nowhere in that conversation was the fact that, hey, we have a bunch of 30-year-olds, and then our next best player up is 18. Where's the development over the last decade, right? There was not, because we didn't have our academy system set properly. And now you're seeing that turnover, right? It doesn't matter what league that they played in. They were past their prime, right? The Bradleys, the Josie, they were pretty much done. Omar Gonzalez, I think, and Matt Beasler were the center backs in Trinidad, right? Now I'm not saying that they couldn't hack it with Trinidad, but you could tell those guys were getting to the end, and there was not a clear cut next step up. That isn't a problem anymore. That will knock on wherever piece of wood I got. Hopefully that will never happen again, because we've got our academy setups. We've got players in dual national spots. We've got all these things to prevent that from ever happening again. Flip that. You've also got our neighbors to the south who are paying big, big money to bring a lot of their national team stars home, which is coinciding with a dip in their national team form.
And we're paying bigger money to bring them to the US.
Exactly. And is the reason that Mexico's so mid right now because all of their stars are playing at home? No. Once again, where's the development of the Mexican national team? A lot of those guys are not even, and maybe I'm off on this, and I'll hear people tell me that, and I'm okay with that because I don't know much about Liga MX, or the Mexican national team, but those players aren't garnering that sort of interest overseas anymore. They're relying a lot on heavy Mexican American dual nationals to help pick their sides, to balance things out. There's a lot more going on than just, they play at home, they suck. Does it have something to do with it in the short term, right? Because it just started doing it, right? Just talked about, sure. But I think there's more than just where you play that comes into why a team is good or bad. But I can hear both sides. I can understand it.
Yeah, that's why I feel like when you're developing, it's important at the moment to be in Europe because of the things that you said. Like, I just think there's a smaller, or I guess lower ceiling if you were to stay in MLS and develop than if you were to go over to Europe and develop. But at some point, you're getting close to your ceiling. There's just not much more room to grow. I don't think it's the end of the world for them to decide I want to come back home and play, because this is a different situation than Europe, where let's just say you're Belgian, right? And you played a bit in the Belgian league when you were younger, and then you did really well and you got a move to, let's just say, the French league, Ligue 1. If you wanted to just go take a trip home because you missed home, you could do that in a weekend. They literally border each other. But if you're Weston McKennie and you're over there in Italy, you can't just take a trip home to the US over a weekend. Like, it would just be too short of a window and too long of a trip to make just a weekend trip out of it. So I don't think it's like inconceivable that a lot of these guys would want to come back to the US earlier on because maybe they just want to be closer to family and friends back home. I really don't think that's so ridiculous of a thought. And so I wouldn't be surprised if you did see more guys come over when they're, I guess, like a bit younger, maybe around the 28 to 30-year-old range, instead of waiting until they're like 35 to come over and spend the last couple of years of their career.
So my question for you then is, what impact does that have on the men's national team? So do you then say, okay, that's fine, take your money, take your family time, take that, but you give up a spot on the national team? Is that something that we should be doing? Do we have enough depth to do that? Like, that's kind of where I think this conversation needs to go. Like, how do we handle something like that as a national team?
I mean, I would think you wouldn't necessarily just immediately kick them out of the national team. I would think, if a guy like Wes came over, he probably is still in the national team until he starts not performing with the national team. And then at that point, you can ask the question of should he still have his spot in the national team? But there's nothing to say that Weston McKennie comes over to MLS and all of a sudden he just loses all ability to have talent. Like his talent's not just going to drain from his body the minute he steps on American soil. Like he will be fine, presumably for the long term. Like I think, and if he honestly, if he did, if his quality dropped, then I genuinely do think we have the depth to swap him out for somebody else. I mean, especially in the midfield, I think there's a lot of that's one of the strongest areas in this national team is the midfield. There's a lot of guys that could play there that aren't getting a lot of minutes. Guys like Johnny and Luca Del Torre. There's a lot of options in the midfield. So if West came over and MLS really truly hurts his quality, then there's a next man up. But I genuinely don't think that he's just going to all of a sudden fall off a cliff if he comes over to MLS.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. And again, that is something that I think people just completely overestimate. Now, again, are you playing against the top level every week? No, you're not, right? And that is one of the things that they're worried about. And that's why I mentioned it's not an immediate short-term thing. Like if Tim Ream and Weston McKennie came back right now and then had to go play in the Copa America, nothing changes. 2 years from now, when they're used to playing against homegrown college kids and a
This
couple
San
of
Jose defense.
yeah, exactly, right, then you're going to start to see that dip. Absolutely, right. There's no disagreements with that. That being said, it was not even 2 weeks ago that we just sat here and watched a team that was all over Twitter. Everyone in the starting 11 plays in a top 5 league. Oh my goodness, this is landmark for the U.S. men's national team. And they got walked by Colombia. They were walked. Being in Europe and living in Europe doesn't instantly make you better. Now, do I want everybody to just come back to MLS because that'd be great for all of us fans here? No, right? I want them to be challenging themselves, but there is a case to be made of either moving too early or making the wrong move, right? How many times have we seen a move go from MLS to Europe too early and it fizzles out, or make it the wrong move and it doesn't work, right? Zach Steffen in Man City then goes on loan parade and he falls out, right? Matt Miazga goes to Chelsea. He's on five different countries in 5 different years. He's out, right? Mihailovic goes and he didn't, really adapt. He has to come home, right? If it's not the right perfect fit, yeah, there's a thing for challenging yourself and being in an environment that is going to push you, sure, but you need one that's going to make you better when it pushes you, not pushes you down, right? And there are players that you can pick out here that are in good spots and bad spots, but it needs to be a more thorough process instead of, oh my God, this guy has been semi decent to good in MLS. Get him into the Netherlands or Belgium's like second division right now. That's not how that's supposed to work, right?
Well, I guess let me ask you the flip side question of it, because I think you were following MLS and the national team more than I was during this period of time. But
Mm-hmm.
are there people you can think of who made the jump maybe too early from Europe back to MLS, would you say?
Too early?
Yeah. Like, do you think there's somebody who jumped back to MLS or just to MLS the first time and it made them worse and hurt their national team career?
Not particularly, no. Because a lot of the guys in the early team were MLS guys anyway, right? There were the odd offs. Again, we're talking about a 2018 team where Josie Altidore's strike partner was Bobby Wood playing in the German second division. That doesn't happen anymore, right? Like that's not our next guy up. So I mean, you think of guys maybe, I can't even say like Clint Dempsey because Clint Dempsey came back to play at Seattle and he was still great for the national team, right? You think of Michael Bradley. Michael Bradley, you can argue the end of his, he was included too long, right? But again, that's not on Michael Bradley. That's on the fact that they couldn't develop players properly, right? They were relying on Mexican dual nationals and European dual, German dual nationals to come in and try and fill spots that weren't working, right? So Josie came back and, Josie was hurt all the time. Josie's the elite USMNT what if, right? What if that dude's completely healthy? Where are we, right? I don't think I can. And again, I can definitely do research and be like, oh, yeah, that guy definitely could have done something better. But off the top of my head, no, I can't.
Yeah, I'm sure there's people that exist out there that meet that criteria, but like you and I can think of, you know, 5+ people who made the jump over to Europe too early. But it's harder to think of guys who hurt their career doing the other way around. And that's where I feel like if Weston or Pooley come over at some point prior to 2026, I really don't think it's the end of the world for them and for the USMNT.
Yeah, correct. And again, I'm not saying like, oh, bring everybody back, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, of course not.
But there is this conversation, and analysts, I hear them talk about it a lot, and I thought about it after they mentioned it. And as a player, as a coach, and now as a supporter, there's a little bit of truth to it where it's really, really nice to have groups of players playing in really high levels, high leagues, commanding good salaries, and getting good minutes, right? If you looked at the starting 15 of the men's national team, they're not just in top 10 leagues. They're playing and performing in top 10 leagues. That's again, a different level than what we're used to. However, when you take all those players and put them together for 6 games a year, because the other couple of games are rotation January camp and they don't really get to play together as much, it's tough to come together and fight for your team. It's more about individual stuff than it is for the group. And that's not me coming out and being like, oh, nobody cares to play for the men's national team badge because they'd rather play for their club. I'm not saying that, but there is also this idea that they grew up where the whole narrative around them was you need to move to Europe and Europe, 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 Europe. So maybe there is that thing in the back of their head that's like, Europe's even better than the national team, where I think in early iterations, it was always the national team is where you want to be. You're going to go through college to play to MLS to get to the national team. That's the goal. Now it's always Europe, Europe, Europe. That'd be interesting to look at. Now I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening, but man, that's an interesting thing that kind of just popped into my head.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a shift in that. I feel like where I do think it's a fair statement that you said where it felt like maybe the sentiment was like college to MLS to you're going to make the national team and that's kind of like your peak. That's your peak moment right there. Whereas like nowadays it's like all right, well, it's not inconceivable for guys to go from, developing in youth academies in the US to jump into Europe to playing in the Champions League and winning the Champions League and also getting into the national team. So it seems like the ceiling kind of got raised once, that door was opened a little bit. It just continued to open more. And I think that's kind of the new wave of development for guys coming through like US academies.
Yeah, it's always the European approach, not the play for your country approach. Because I remember that was the whole thing. You went through ODP, and if you went to ODP, you looked at, you were the local ODP, then you went to regional, then it was state, then it was, bigger and bigger until it's like, oh, you might be in the national team pool. And like that was always the goal. Now, players like me, unfortunately, were overlooked for a number of stupid reasons, but that was always the path, right? And now it's like, oh, we want to get you into a club academy to get you up to a club team that will get you sold to other club teams. The national team is such a quiet. Oh, that could be a really cool episode to dive into the differences between the two. We'll come back to that. I don't want to harp on that too long, but to bring it back to our point, right? Like when you have all these players who are coming from Europe all the way into one national team for a week at a time, it feels as a player, it feels individual, right? I remember being a guest player on a couple teams, and these guys are all talking about how they hate this team, they hate that team, and all these teams are, the rivals and stuff. And I'm just like, I'm here to keep the ball out of the net. Like, okay, right? There was no connection to that meaning. Now, I think it's different for a national team, but at the end of the day, it's tough to have that same thing going on. Now, when we were way back in earlier version of the men's national team, where it was a lot of MLS guys, mostly MLS guys, they all played together and they weren't necessarily that good, but they went through it and they fought for each other because that's who they were. They saw each other week in, week out in their club teams or week in, week out against each other. And there was that fight that said, okay, we're going to come together. We're going to take that. And we're going to put it right on and MLS tactics were all the same at that time too, right? Here's the ball. Good guys up over that way. Try and kick it to him. And then cool. right? And a lot of the times, those guys were the good guys, right? Where now everybody's got a different style of how they're going to press and how they're going to possess and how they're going to do it. It could be tough for that stuff to mesh. So, would it help to bring them all be a part of it? It might.
Yeah, I
Again,
mean,
it's probably a stretch, right?
I feel like I've been seeing it more as of late, where people are talking like doing comparisons between the USMNT of the Dempsey era, the Tim Howard era versus the current USMNT. And I think the one thing where, because you look at the results and you look at the players and you say this current USMNT should be so much better than our old USMNT. Like the quality and the technical ability just feels so much better, but yet our results in tournaments have not improved. If anything, they've gotten worse. So what's causing that? And obviously, like there's a glaring like answer to that question, a very bald, glaring answer to that question. Uh, but I think one other thing that other people have mentioned that has been very interesting, and it's something that caught my eye as well, is just a mentality part of it. Like when you think of that old, like older Dempsey, Howard, Josie, USMNT team, like they were mentality monsters. Like they were every time they stepped on the field, it was like we're the underdog, but we're gonna play so hard. Like it was like a bunch of dogs on the field out there every single time. And I don't get that feeling with this national team. I don't get that feeling like in the slightest. And I don't know if that's because of what you mentioned. You said a lot of these guys were playing against each other week in, week out. I don't know if that would help improve it. I don't know if it starts at the top, like if it's a Greg issue, but there certainly seems to be that lack of like mentality with this national team. Maybe if they had that, it could take them to the next level and really hit that ceiling that we have been dying to see from this national team.
No, 100%, right? End of the day, playing in more difficult environments is going to get you better, right? If you are up to the challenge. However, it needs to be the right place, right? I think that's kind of the thing here now. Again, if a host of them come back, I think MLS needs to change their roster rules to facilitate, like we talk about, like, oh, taking advantage of the Messi era, right? And changing roster. That's not what you need to take advantage of if you're trying to do both. You need to take advantage of, if these guys are going to come back, you need to be able to allow teams to surround them with other players at that level so we can start competing with other teams, right? Okay. You've waited patiently. You were a very good, patient little student. Here's the question of the day. It's club over country or country over club. Can you support both to get better equally?
Yeah, I mean, if you got a brain, then yeah, obviously you want both to develop. Unless you're just clearly an MLS hater or just dumb, you obviously want MLS to get better because that will only make the national team better. Because as I said before, a number of these national team guys had spent some time in their youth development with MLS or an MLS academy. So if they're continuously improving and finding more talent within the country, that will only be a good thing for the men's national team when they eventually develop and move over to Europe. And if we can develop MLS maybe even to a point where they don't even need to go over to Europe anymore and they could just develop domestically, that could be potentially even better because now, like I said, I think it could be beneficial for them in terms of getting chemistry. I know you'd mentioned that teams play different styles and it was easier to kind of have a better understanding in the past when everybody's playing the exact same style. But I still think playing against each other week in, week out would help figure out how to play with one another because you get to see more of how this guy plays. Oh, I know that this guy typically does this on the field. So when I'm playing with him, I have an idea of like what he likes to do and what he's good at. Whereas right now, you got guys in like France, Italy, Germany, England, like different divisions in England. Like they're all over the place. They're so scattered. They don't probably get to, see each other play except for when they're in these like week-long stints with the national team, which just like isn't enough time. So I think it could benefit the national team exponentially if the domestic league grew. I mean, some of the best national teams around the world have strong domestic teams. And I'm not saying you have to have um, strong domestic leagues to have a strong national team. We've seen that with Argentina and Brazil, who have good uh, domestic leagues, but not to the level of their national team. But a lot of other countries like England and Spain, I think, have benefited massively from that. So I think if you have an ounce of brain matter in your brain, then you should realize that making MLS better will make the national team better.
Awesome. So my comments are going to transfer from Middlesbrough haters to
Yes.
Argentinian league and Brazilian league haters. Good. That's
Oh, but I don't know. Their league is still better than MLS. Like I'm not saying
there
that,
you
but
go.
I'm just
Cover,
saying
cover, cover.
no. But I mean, it's true. They're I think both top 10 leagues. They're just not like England, Spain, Germany level, where their national teams certainly are.
For me, this whole topic came out of a conversation that I had to have with somebody who thoroughly believes that you can want MLS, you can want the U.S. men's national team players. Let me rephrase that. You can want MLS to get better by not touching the U.S. men's national team players, and I don't believe that. I think that there is I'm not saying the Venn diagram's a circle of those people who think that MLS is allowed to get better, but only if they don't mess with our national team. That Venn diagram, it's not a circle, but you need a really, really fine microscope to see the difference between them, right? Because you hear it all the time. The main reason people are like, oh, I'm not watching MLS because of the quality. Make it better and I'll watch. And then we do stuff like this. And you mentioned this. That's why I wanted you to save it to the end. They come in and the second they try to make it, it's like, oh my god, this is such an unserious league. They're trying to ruin their national team because they want to just have all their fans at home. No one's out here being like, oh my god, MLS is clear of the Premier League. Some of us are out here saying MLS are clear of Middlesbrough and blowing up my comment section. But listen, even though a lot of the leagues that people use to compare get way overhyped and overstated, we're going to bring back imagine this happened in MLS next year and it's going to be the
The
league,
return.
the return. Um, it's always make the league better and we'll watch. It's not that hard. And then anytime they try to make it better, it's like, as we said, they just blow up and there are all these excuses. I think that the group that genuinely cares about the improvement of MLS, who are USMNT first people, is very, very small. The people who will go out and support their MLS side and want them to buy, because that was the whole thing is this guy on Twitter, I believe is Thin Mints FC. We had a good conversation. He's a good dude. He comes out and he says, I want MLS to go and buy young Argentinian guys and sell them on and get better that way. Right. Fair. You can have that thought process. That's awesome. The general USMNT fan does not know that. They do not understand why we do things like that. They only care about where the best players are and following those players, right? There's a whole host of people who only watch USMNT and don't watch any other league, not even the European players, European American players overseas, right? I think it's a little bit hypocritical for people to come in and be like, "Oh, make it better," and then, "Oh, we're just gonna complain when they take somebody that we don't like," because it's either you want them to get better or you don't, and you want the national team to be better. I don't believe that there's much of an overlap there. This isn't the first time that we've seen something like this happen. Weston McKennie starts being rumored to come overseas. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. Miles Robinson, just this offseason, needs to go be on the bench at PSV, chooses to play in FC Cincinnati. I don't want him anywhere near my national team, right? And I'm not saying that there is a group of people, because I want to make sure I hit all the bit. I'm not saying there's a group of people who don't like MLS and don't want their national team players there because they think that they're going to get a better experience somewhere else. That's not who I'm trying to address this to. Specifically, this is for the people who say, I want MLS to get better. And then every time they try to get better, this is their response, right? I just want to clarify that before they do, because there's always a predisposition that when people who usually say, I want MLS to get better, and then this is their response to them trying to get better, is that in their head, MLS is always going to be inferior to them. It doesn't matter what happens, who they try to buy, it will always have a negative spin on it.
I mean, they don't the only way they want MLS to get better is if they go full like retro NASL. Like throw every financial restriction out the window and just go buy everybody that you can immediately. But what I don't understand is we've seen multiple cases of that not work at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't work in China and it hasn't worked in the Saudi League. So why would we do that? Why would you do that? And then in that case, they're just going to completely scrap the idea of MLS getting better. They don't care about MLS getting better. They don't care about the league at all. All they care about is just the national team, send them over to Europe because MLS is trash and MLS is not going to get better. I think these are, well, first of all, the league is, they've built like over the last few years through signing young South American players, developing them, selling them on. But you can only take so much of that and build like a full squad out of young South American players. You got to be able to build the depth and the squad as a whole with domestic players. And bringing over more national team guys is a great way to do that.
Yeah. And again, it just kind of it's a spinning loop, right? Make it better and I'll watch, but they really mean make it better, but don't touch our national team players, right? Ruin somebody else's national team to get better. But anytime we bring in anybody who's a different player that isn't 20 years old, it's a retirement signing, his career's over. Right? It's a double standard that, again, the main reason that this came out is there was the tweet that I used was basically saying at the end of the day, the reason why the US or MLS does not care about their USMNT or kind of focus of that demographic is because of the comments like this. When MLS tries to do that, everybody's like, oh my God, this is terrible. Where if any other team in the world is looking at signing a very good player to raise the level of the quality, every fan of that league and in that country is like, this is awesome. Because right now the national team is still rated above club. And that's where I think the separation is. I think you've got people who care about the national team more than any club because MLS started late and the national team's been around and MLS has all this negative hate around it for whatever reason. So they latch on to the national team, and that's fine. It gives them an outlet. It gives them something to watch. That's awesome. But it also leads to this disposition of I don't need them to do anything because I don't care. I want my national team to be the best that it can be. And right now that means that they need to be in Europe.
Yeah, which is true.
Yeah.
It's a true statement. Not going to argue against that.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Please share your thoughts with us. We always enjoy hearing what you have to say about these thoughts. Again, we tried to look at it both ways. How does it affect MLS? How does it affect the men's national team? Can you have a cross section where you are supporting both by keeping them all together? I don't quite know. So let us know your thoughts. We'll definitely go in there and make sure you're following so you can see our MLS midseason awards and review that comes out on Wednesday, wherever you get podcasts. I was going to say wherever you get Spotify. I was like, that's not right. Wherever you get podcasts. And then make sure you're following us on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, where we are most active so you can interact with us. We are 40 subs away from the 500 mark on YouTube. Thank you to Connor, who now has our clip up to 700 views and 35 comments.
You're welcome.
This is right about the same level as the MLS pyramid thing that we put out. That's on like 1,800 views right now. And then on Twitter, we're looking at about 70 to 700, which is really cool. And then on TikTok, we're only 9 away from 400. So we've got a pretty good group here. We want you to be a part of it. So go follow us, the Designated Players. It'll pop up for you. Look for the blue and black, I guess, logo. Is it blue? Is it green? I think it's blue.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for listening, everybody. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope to see you on the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.